All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Tourism Task Force. We give everybody just a quick minute to get in the room. We have a really exciting speaker this morning. We're super excited to hear what Lou has to say to us. I'm going to give everybody just a quick second. All right, so just as a reminder, we will be recording this meeting and it will be posted on the Chamber website. So if you would like to listen to it again or refer some of your contacts to the Chamber website so they can view it as well, we'd be happy for you to share it with anybody that you feel appropriate. We are going to be having a discussion kind of meeting today. We have a speaker, Lou Hughes, who's with us from Moving Minds. Those of you who are not familiar, this is a company that recently relocated to the West Palm area and was actually a great acquisition for our community. To have someone of Lou's credibility join our community is really exciting. So I'm thrilled that he's going to be talking to you this morning. He does want to answer questions. I know you guys often have some very thoughtful questions, so feel free to put those in the chat. Or if it's a particularly timely question that you really want to just jump right in, you're welcome to do that as well. But go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and then we'll get to as many of those as we can. And then, of course, we do self-introductions at the end of this meeting, so you will have an opportunity to introduce yourself to everybody in the meeting, tell us just a little bit about what's going on with you, and then we will be sending you the contact information of everyone who attends as well tomorrow. So, as you guys know, I don't often spend a lot of time with self-introductions during these meetings just because we only have an hour together, and I really want you to have the time with Lou. But suffice to say, he is extremely accomplished. We were just discussing a moment ago, he went to the University of Southern California. I was in California yesterday, Harvard University and the University of Alabama. He's been around the country going to school a lot, and he's brought all of this knowledge and expertise to us. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn the floor over to Lou. Lou, you can add anything to your bio that you would like to. And I'm really excited to talk about, bringing business back to our tourism industry here in Palm Beach County. So Lou, I'm just going to hand it over to you and let you take it away.
Terrific. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, terrific. So I'm going to share my screen. This is always the interesting part of every presentation, right? So let me just go ahead and view the slideshow. So how about now? Can everybody see the title of the presentation? All right, terrific. So I just wanted to say thank you for having me, Kelly and Kirby. I really am grateful. As she mentioned, our firm is new to the area. We've been actually based in Ponte Vedra for the last 15 years, and we sort of rode the tsunami of migration, a little bit earlier adopter. So we were here last year and very excited to be here and met a lot of great people. So we're excited to be with you today and appreciate you coming. So I'd like to make this a little bit interactive. If you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. I will come around. We had some solicitations as to questions that you may have and subjects that you might want to cover here. I got 2 of those responsives, and we can sort of follow up on that towards the end. But I thought we would focus today on a little bit of a different twist, perhaps, and that is that there's such a focus in hospitality and tourism on direct to consumer. How do we reach the end user, the hotel guest? But oftentimes, maybe we do that at the exclusion of corporates, right? So I'd be curious actually to ask all of you here, as a percentage of your business, how much of the business is actually corporate versus pure driven by direct to consumer? Any thoughts on that? And you're welcome to speak up too, by the way. You don't have to post it in the chat.
Yeah, good morning, Lou. This is Ali over at the DoubleTree West Palm Beach. Just some insight from what our travelers are currently have. We are pretty much 70% leisure traveler right now, and I would say about 10 or 15% corporate traveler. We are seeing some corporate travelers starting to increase, but majority of travelers right now is leisure with a lot of demand on the weekends. That's what we see currently.
Ali, is that true historically, or is it a larger percentage of the business on a historical basis?
No, this is actually quite different than what we used to in the past. In the past, we had a pretty balanced 50%, corporate traveler, 50% leisure traveler, and we were much heavier with corporate traveler during the weekdays. But now that has completely changed, and we're seeing a lot more leisure on the weekends than weekdays, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that by visiting like the Breakers and some of the hotels around town. You can certainly see we're very fortunate to be in Florida, and as business people, as well as folks that are living here because of the restrictions, right? So, but that's good to know. So historically, it's about a 50-50 balance. I was guessing it was probably in the 60 to 40 sort of weighted consumer, a little bit heavier. But I thought we'd sort of focus on, so as we can see sort of the tourism, the consumer coming back, I thought we could focus on sharing some of the most innovative techniques that are available that are being used by other types of industries that you either haven't maybe heard of or have heard of, may not be employing, or some of you may be actually using these types of capabilities. But I thought we could kind of go through what is sort of the bleeding edge of B2B marketing. And that's obviously the focus is to drive corporates back to our community. So with that, let me just briefly mention a little bit about us. We are a global technology and marketing agency. We work with a lot of VCs and private equity companies to help them stand up an entire enterprise marketing organization on an outsourced basis. So we essentially leverage fractional resources to be able to execute integrated multi-channel programs. So that's kind of what we do. We've worked with all types of clients in all types of industries, as you can see here, from Apple and Citi to Fannie Mae and CBS News. All right, so let's start with the first concept, which is called account-based marketing. How many of you have actually heard of the term ABM, if you don't mind me asking? Okay, Kelly's heard of it. Great. So let's talk a little bit about what it is, because there are different definitions of what it actually is. So ABM was created about 6 years ago. It was driven by two software companies. One is called Terminus and one is called Demandbase. And they really sort of pioneered the subject matter. And this became sort of its own monster category of product solutions, software. And essentially what happened was, there was no effective means to target people, business decision makers, right? So if you think about Google and Facebook, those are really designed initially for reaching the consumer end user, right, the tourist. But they're really not particularly effective to reach corporates and business users, right, business decision makers. So ABM was generated to sort of create a warm outreach. So as you reach out cold to prospects, whether they be event planners or VPs of sales who are planning incentive trips or whatever it may be, there's really no way to really effectively target them. So you have to sort of blast in the same way that you generally have to target consumers, and it's grossly inefficient, right? So you're talking about really a decision-making group within a company of 4 to 5 people as to where they're going to move their particular event this particular year. So doing the sort of same old with your end consumer is really just not effective. So ABM was generated to sort of flip the funnel, right? So if you think about traditional marketing funnel is doing shotgun blasts, very wide targeting, getting people to drive them to your site, and then capturing intent data, first party data to be able to remarket to them. ABM is completely different. It actually, rather than blasting casting a wide net, ABM actually casts sort of a laser focus. And that is, you essentially target the companies that you want to attract to your institution, your organization. In case of a software company, you target the prospects you want to buy your product. In this case, we would target the VP of sales at a particular company like Google, so that person would bring their sales incentive conference or maybe their product kickoff conference to the Palm Beach Convention Center. So it really flips the whole funnel on its head. So ABM really is allowing you to target just specific companies rather than geo-targeting specific areas using an IP address. And you can do that by segmenting the key customers that you want to target. So what we're seeing across other industries is that ABM is a very effective means to be able to generate what we call a very targeted funnel, right? So 97% of marketers are seeing a higher ROI with ABM than any other type of marketing strategy or ad spend. So how do you measure ABM KPIs? KPIs are really the same that you would focus on for consumer audiences, except they're very different in the sense that you're being able to target a micro contact data rather than, again, a sort of an anonymous set of users who are coming in and you see page views on an aggregate basis. With ABM, you're actually able to convert that visit into an individual prospect because of the data acquisition process. So let me share a little bit more about that. So in terms of a use case, so let's take Ali, let's take your hotel, right? So if you have 50 organizations that you want to attract to your particular conference center or your ballrooms or convention areas, we would identify those companies. They could be out of market. They can be really anywhere in any industry. And we generally start with a set of these key accounts, and we essentially then run digital ads using their IP addresses to that specific entity, right? So there's no bleed into consumers or non-decision makers. You can, if you want to target IBM in downtown Manhattan, you can target IBM, right? So reaching the particular, the end users, the decision makers. And then you're driving them to the destination, right? A landing page about the value proposition that you offer for your particular organization. And then what you're doing is you're then following up. So you're warming your outreach, right? So you take a 30 to 60 day period of warming them up, becoming aware of your particular organization or institution, and then following that with your SDRs, or what we call the sales development team, that is making all of the outbound calls. So you're really supporting what it is that they're doing, because otherwise they're doing cold outreach, which is pretty tough to do, right? So this is kind of what it looks like. So if you think about IBM as your ideal customer profile, or whatever organization it is that you want to target, you're literally delivering your particular digital ads to that location, which again, there's no bleed, right? So you're not paying for any wasted impressions. You're utilizing the budget that you have to drive to corporate institutions to your organization more efficiently. ABM uses the same networks that you're driving consumers to, or you're advertising to consumers. You're just targeting those particular institutions. So when they're on their private networks, they're seeing your particular ad. So how do you sort of set up an ABM program? So step one is really defining the organizations that you want to target to bring this to this particular area for their business events. You want to develop, obviously, your value proposition. What is interesting about this particular area or your particular organization or event venue? And then you look at sort of the integration of the channels. You're determining your budget. You're creating the campaigns much as you would do for the consumer. And then you're deploying those campaigns and following it up with sales outreach on a 30 to 60 day basis, coming behind that particular process. So what powers ABM? Right. So all of you are probably experts in, customer data, right? In first party data. There's a proliferation of data tools out there that allow us to actually target very specific people in specific companies. So you may be doing some of this to some extent today, but let's say you have an event planner that's sitting at Palo Alto at Google, and they can't have an event in Santa Barbara or Los Angeles or wherever. And gosh, you know what, they've been holed up for a year. They'd like to probably come to maybe Palm Beach, right? So we can actually have the tools that are available to us. There's actually a number of vendors. One is called seamless.io. There are other companies like ZoomInfo, where we can acquire the contact data for that particular individual that we want to influence and speak to, right? So we can use that data for marketing, building top of mind awareness, and then using that same data as a sales, as the contact data needed for your sales team to be able to do the proper outreach and have accurate information. So what does that look like? So if we wanted to target Mark Zuckerberg or the head of Google or Mark Benioff of Salesforce, we actually have that data available to us. We can get their mobile number. The data, the old days of being able to acquire data by, kind of doing the the old shakedown in an alley where you kind of broke down, you kind of talked to a broker and it was kind of shady, and then they send you a list, and God knows if the list had any accurate data in it. Those days are really gone. The data now that is available is verified and pretty much about 85% to 90% verified and accurate. So we're in a totally different world than we used to be, where, again, you were sort of buying things in the back alley in terms of customer data, and it was generally garbage. So we're in a really, really great space right now with regard to that. So how do you take that data? What do you do with it? The other component that we're seeing combined with ABM and data is the use of the data to social sell. So I don't know how many of you have sort of used social selling. I actually had on my own first experience with it. I was interested in Miami Dolphins tickets, and I joined a couple of Twitter groups that I was following. And I actually had a rep for the Miami Dolphins sales organization reach out to me for season tickets. He directed and messaged me on Twitter, which was really, really cool, right? So it sort of broke through the clutter in terms of your email box and really created an impression. And from that point, we started texting each other and so forth. So there's a completely new dynamic about how you can go to market and sell to an individual person. It's kind of remarkable. So how do you do that, right? So when you're doing B2B sales, it's become more complicated. It's not just the cold calls and the emails and so forth. It's the combination of all of these things that generally create a result. And so that's the use of account-based marketing to create the top of the funnel awareness. It might be that you're visiting that particular person or connecting with them on LinkedIn. You might be combining that with email. You might follow that individual on Twitter and thus be able to DM them directly to kind of break through it's called pattern disruption, right? So you're kind of like, wow, this person didn't send me an email. Like I've got 50 of those from sales prospectors or salespeople. I got a DM from this person. So again, it's pattern disruption, doing things that are unexpected and unusual. You can also text message people. So you're talking about then Facebook following. So you're really integrating all of the touch points to create an impression on a particular prospect. So what is social selling? So this is a good example. This is a target of ours, a gentleman who's a doctor. And essentially what we're doing is we're connecting with him in LinkedIn. We're acquiring his contact data. We are following him on Twitter, following his company on LinkedIn. And then we're sending actually messages within LinkedIn to connect with him and to create a relationship, right? So you have to be, kind of careful about selling on LinkedIn, but it's really building a relationship over time that's most effective. And the world of selling is so different today than it used to be. We can actually reach people. You used to sort of knock on the door. The secretary wouldn't let you in or wouldn't forward your call to the executive. Now we can actually reach them completely directly on all of these social platforms. It's pretty remarkable. So there's also other components we can leverage data for to reach business to business decision makers. And that is the use of contact targeting and custom audiences. So if we go to the trouble of buying or essentially you're subscribing to a service that provides contact data like Seamless, as I mentioned, you can actually take that data and load it into LinkedIn, load it into Twitter. Google, it requires a certain amount of spend to be able to do that. And most of you on a consumer basis are probably at that point, but there is a very high threshold from an ad spend perspective. But if you do reach that, you have the ability then to load those contact lists and build what they call a customized audience, right? So then you can deliver your content, your offers, your value proposition directly to that particular individual. So again, you're kind of eliminating the bleed that's associated with canvassing and casting a wide net that's typically done with consumer audiences. So that, all of that data then is sort of like, okay, well, I can see, it's very different, right? So you're thinking about marketing to consumers, you're looking at Google Analytics, it's anonymous data, right? You have no idea who's visiting the site, right? You're running ads, you're doing print, you're doing television, broadcast, you might be doing cable, direct mail, whatever it might be. You still don't really know unless they fill out a form or make an inbound phone call or make a reservation who that individual is. The way that B2B now works is that once we have that contact data, we can actually use a tool. Well, this is a tool called Lead Feeder, which actually tells us which organizations that we've been marketing into whether or not they're actually visiting our website. And then that notifies your sales team to be able to then say, okay, well, Apple visit our website. We've been deploying ABM campaigns. We've got the contact data. We're running custom audiences. And now that all of those efforts are now generating a result, right? They're visiting our property. And now it's up to our sales team to then reach out to them, knowing that they're interested in your particular institution for perhaps to host an event. So we've come a long way from where Google Analytics was before, where it was completely anonymous. You could see aggregate results and improvements in visits and page views and all of that. Now we can actually see on almost an individual level who's visiting and who's interested, which makes it a lot easier to prioritize who we sell into or make outbound calls to in terms of the prospects that we're courting from a B2B perspective. So the other component, and this is going to change in 2022 because they're doing away with cookies, and many of you are probably doing this already with your consumer marketing, but you're retargeting, right? So when they visit your website, you're tagging them with a cookie, and as they go into the internet netherworld, they are going to see, the Breakers ads or the Palm Beach Convention Center ads or whatever it may be. And they're going to see that pervasively across all platforms. So remarketing is essentially, they visit the site, they get tagged with a cookie, and then they sort of see you everywhere. You've probably seen this with retail stores, shoe stores, Macy's, other types of retailers who are using this tactic very effectively. And it's a very inexpensive way to build a funnel over a long time, especially as people are considering longer cycles in terms of a purchase or an event considerations that are associated with that, where you've got perhaps a long sales cycle there. So that's the culmination of all of these things is what we call omnipresent. So you want to be essentially in front of every prospect across every channel. And by essentially social selling, by aggregating all of the contact data, by employing ABM programs, by using retargeting, you're essentially able to create a ubiquitous environment where they see your brand pretty much everywhere you go, right? From YouTube to Twitter to LinkedIn to Google. And of course, as you know, as marketers, when you integrate and run multi-channel programs, they're more effective. Frankly, they're just more effective because they see you everywhere, right? And it takes 7 to 8 impressions generally for somebody to be able to actually be influenced and then subtly to sort of make a decision like, okay, I need a car. And that's why car companies run advertisements consistently, right? So with that, that is the presentation. I'd be happy to open it up to you and ask any questions that you may have. I hope it's certainly been interesting, and hopefully these are subjects that you're maybe not as familiar with on the, wrestling with on the consumer side, but I'd be happy to open the floor to questions. And I know there was another comment that was made earlier before the presentation about how to manage customer reviews and comments via social media platforms. And I'm happy to address that too.
Well, Lou, thank you very much. This has been a great presentation and very well timed. I think particularly since here in Florida, we're moving from our high season to an off season. This is the moment where we really start to work on strategic planning for these types of meetings, which tend to plan a little further out, than your typical retail customer who gets up and says, well, let's go on vacation next weekend. And, we'll drive, an hour away and have a little staycation. So I think this kind of thoughtful strategic planning is very well timed for our audience. We did have a question about the ABM. It says, is ABM only driven by IP addresses, or can it be targeted by emails and phone numbers?
Well, you can come. So ABM generally, in terms of the delivery of digital ads, is used through what I would call it is broad-based ABM, right? It's based on delivering ads to a specific organization or an organization's location, like their headquarters. So for example, if we wanted to run digital ads for, again, the DoubleTree or whatever organization, we could run those ads to the Palo Alto headquarters of a VC company, or to Google, or to Facebook, or to any other company that's in the United States, or really for that matter in the world. As long as we know their IP address, we can then deliver those ads. Now, that's broad-based because you're still reaching everybody in the organization, right? So then you follow that up with the contact data, right? So you've got the broad-based ABM that I shared with you initially, and then you leverage the contact data, right? So we scrape the data of the decision makers, the event planners, maybe the CMO, the VPs of sales, whoever are the decision makers or the group of decision makers, probably the CEO as well, as to where they want to plan the next event, right? So we'll scrape their data using these tools like Seamless or Zoom Info. We'll pull that data, we'll append it, right? We'll fill in the gaps so that we don't have with their personal emails, their business emails, their business phone numbers. In some cases, they may have probably a combined mobile phone sort of thing. So then we take that contact data, and when you're talking about delivering it to the individual, we create the custom audiences in the various social platforms. And that is delivered specific to the individual, that specifically. So it's a combination of the two techniques, kind of the broad-based ABM, which is not really broad-based, it's targeted to the organization. And then you have the contact level targeting. So those two things in combination are how you create this sort of ubiquitous environment where they see you everywhere that they go. You can combine that with text, actually. I had a company in the software space that I filled a form out and they texted me within 3 seconds with a sales rep. So and again, follow up and response times are really critical, not only in terms of the sales process and driving businesses here, right? Because they can go down the Rolodex to the next city and decide on moving it if you're not responsive, but also on the customer review side, right? So Facebook, kind of tie that into the question that we had is, there are, if you don't respond in a certain amount of time, one, that review is sitting out there and people are seeing it without you addressing it. And the other thing is that Facebook really grades you on your response times, actually. So it affects your placement in the algorithm and so forth. So hopefully that helps.
And that's a perfect answer to the question and an excellent segue right into how do we handle positive and negative reviews. So if you'd like to speak to that for a second, I think it's perfect timing.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different platforms for helping. So I don't know who asked that question. Do you mind if, do we know who asked that particular question? Are they here with us? Okay. There we go. All right, I see you. So what was let me ask you just to make sure I'm making my comments as relevant as possible, Ollie. What's kind of the pain point? What's the struggle or the challenge? And it is, all these platforms, it's very hard to manage, really. And that's why we exist, to help companies do that. But what are the challenges that you shared with us via the email, if you don't mind?
Sure, yeah. The current situation in I think in our industry right now, in the hospitality industry, has evolved to a point where I think we have a lot of guest reviews on all channels, all media, as it is it's easily accessible for everyone to post a review. And subsequently, there's a tremendous amount of negative reviews that are being sent to hotels, and I'm sure that's different travel organizations, and it's really difficult to be able to respond to these because it's just in such a vast volume.
Yeah. So
just trying to figure out what is the best approach to this. And obviously we want to respond to all of them as quickly as possible, but
yeah,
the volume is so vast that it makes it difficult.
Yeah, there's no question about it. From online directories, which there are hundreds, and most of them are collecting reviews, to just even having your contact data and your organization linked from those directories. There are some new tools that allow us to aggregate. So there are directory listing tools. Yext is one of those, YEXT, for proliferating your phone number, your contact data, your address, and your mapping location across all of these disparate directories, which is really challenging. That's kind of one piece. The other piece is reputation management, which is kind of what you're speaking of. And there are two tools that I highly recommend. They have some overlap, but there's also different functionality within one that's not included in the other. So you have to kind of figure out what you need in particular. But there's a solution called Bird-Eye, BIRDEYE, and that is a reputation management tool. So it aggregates all of your disparate social media platforms and allows you to manage that from a central dashboard, right? So you get notified it has a desktop notification, you get a review. And obviously the quicker you respond, it's like crisis communications, right? You sort of deal with it directly, honestly, and as fast as possible to resolve that. And that generally, actually, you can turn that situation around pretty fast. Sometimes you can't. There's also another tool called Podium. Podium is just as you would think it would be spelled, is a very similar tool. It has some different functionality. It actually allows you to solicit reviews. So part of your strategy should not just be in sort of being, out of, this is not the right word, but, sort of opportunistic, meaning I'm going to solicit the reviews that only people that are disgruntled are going to submit. Part of the strategy really needs to be on focusing on the customers who care about, they had a great experience. But as you know, right, if you have a bad experience, you're 10 times more likely to complain about it than you are if you've had a wonderful experience. So the way to calibrate that and improve your star rating is to solicit more reviews from the people who loved the experience that they had. And you need a tool like a Podium or a Bird Eye to help you do that. And so you can, you can run surveys from Podium. You can actually collect payments. You can do text marketing. It actually is a really amazing tool, but that's the one that we usually install and operate for our clients. In some cases, we actually run their social media programs. And as a part of that, we're managing that for them. And we build talking points and scripts and things of that nature based on the type of category of complaint or compliment or what have you. And we can triage it real quickly if it needs to escalate. But generally, we have kind of scripts that we apply based on certain situations. But the way to offset bad reviews is to generate 10 times more positive reviews, right? And that'll you'll go from 3.5 to 5 or 4.5 fairly quickly. But what's happening is organizations don't know how to solicit good reviews, right? So you have to be able to use a tool like that will allow you to do that.
Wow, I think that's excellent advice, Lou. I like the premise of being more proactive than reactive, because to Allie's point, you're always going to have someone who's unhappy about something. It's impossible to please everybody all the time. You want to deal with them as quickly and as effectively as you can, but I like this strategy of being a little more on the front end of it, and having a tool to really solicit those positive reviews, because you're not going to be able to stop the negative ones. You just have to figure out a strategy to deal with them. So I like that. Allie, did that help you?
Yeah, absolutely. That was excellent feedback. I definitely going to look into both those as a source for us.
Yeah, I will be looking at them as well.
Yeah, we can help you, if you needed help on questions about that and requirements and things. The other thing you might want to think about is sequencing it, right? So running a survey to that particular user after they check out. You can run a survey via text prompt. You can run it via an email prompt. But doing that first and then finding out what they grade you and then soliciting a review, right? So then if you in fact get a poor rating on the survey, you're not sending a review solicitation to that particular prospect. So that's another way to kind of think about sequencing your outreach on a post-visit sort of basis.
I like that. Excellent. More questions. Who else has a question for Lou?
How many local companies do you deal with here in Palm Beach County? I mean, the stuff you're talking about is absolutely fascinating and it's very intriguing. So I'd like to know that.
Well, to be honest with you, in the 15 years that we have been in business, most of our clients do not exist in Florida. Actually, they exist either in, really they're spread out across the United States. But as a part of one of the reasons why we moved here is we recognized that Miami and South Florida were Palm Beach Tech was a big instigator of our desire to move here, because we felt like this was a great area. It upgraded our ability to find great talent. There are great businesses here. There's certainly more so than in North Florida, which is a relatively sleepy business community. So, but we don't work with a lot of Florida companies actually, but I think what we bring, and that's why I think we're unusual in terms of the skill sets and IP that we bring to the area is very different than the traditional agencies that exist here. And they are all great agencies and wonderful, but we bring a very different kind of a blend of the art and the science together, which is really what marketing is now. I mean, it's very complicated. I was explaining to somebody yesterday, and one, they asked, what are the right channels to market to our prospects on, right? Because you can't do them all. And so how do you prioritize what levers to pull? And that's a challenge that every CEO and marketer has to make, because you have limited and finite budgets. So we help companies kind of navigate that. But we felt like this would be a great place. So we're actually expanding our footprint. We're going to be hiring here locally. We've essentially been a virtual company up until this point because we didn't have a hiring base of talent in the communities that we previously led. But we would love to work with a lot of different companies here in South Florida across a number of vertical industries. We'd be delighted if you're interested to follow up and certainly share any perspective that I can on your particular circumstances and help guide you in any way that we can.
Well, I have to say, Lou, when I first met you and you had just moved to this area, I did a little research on you and your company, and it was clear to me that you had a different approach from most of the agencies in our area. So that's one of the reasons that I was so excited to have you speak to this group. Sergio is also on this call from Discover the Palm Beaches. And I don't know whether you know him or not, but you guys definitely need to get together and have a cup of coffee. They also do some really interesting data mining that is fascinating to me. These kinds of topics, this is like, my sweet spot. I love this stuff. So, Sergio, I want to encourage you and Lou to get together outside of this meeting and talk about how you might help one another. I'm curious, in this group, how many of you are doing this type of marketing, or is this all kind of new to you? Would anybody like to chime in? No, kind of quiet group this morning. Okay, it is a diverse group, and I love that we have some hoteliers here, and then we have some more consumer to consumer type of companies. Shireen is here from her visitor center, and they do so many different things there. I wonder, Lou, if you have some suggestions on how to kind of cross market. If you have one company or a customer that comes to you with a certain need, maybe it's in that event space, how do you transition them into more of the marketing that you do? Because a lot of our tourism industry gets somebody who comes to them for one thing, but they do offer more than one, and sometimes you need to figure out how to gracefully transition to a different type of message. Could you talk just a moment about that?
Are you talking about the agency, or are you talking about the end user, the consumer?
I would say probably the end user, the consumer, but I would love to hear it from the agency perspective as well.
So Kelly, just rephrase that for me, just so I totally make sure I understand what you're asking, if you don't mind.
So if somebody comes to me, for example, if I'm you, Lou, and Kelly Finelli Enterprises comes to you and says, I would like to plan an incentive travel program. It's about 3 years out, because those types of programs do plan, 2 to 5 years out. My program is 3 years out. In the 3 years that we're working on this, how will you transition me into looking at your ABM type of offerings? Because I think sometimes that's a tricky transition, but the more you can repurpose a client into the various things that you offer, the better it is for your business.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do my best to answer that. And so, generally the tactics that we've shared with you are applied to, the B2B sales process, which is generally a much longer sales process, right? So it's not like I have an impulse to buy new shoes, and I go online and I take care of it and I get them, delivered that afternoon from Amazon. These are more of a slow boil, right? So as you know, building brand recognition is, traditionally done through broad-based broadcast media, right? So, and most people don't have the ability to do that. So how, with limited budgets, can you reach people and influence their decision making? And today we have the data, we have the platforms, we have the delivery mechanisms to be able to reach individual people, unlike we've ever had before. And so, in terms of, ABM, for example, if you think about like the BDB, which has done such an amazing job in bringing all of these opportunities to and all of these new companies, part of which they were instrumental in helping us relocate as well. We talk about, how do you sell Palm Beach County? Well, you can deliver different creative over a period of time to that end user, right? So, and hopefully I'm answering the question, meaning the BDB has a lot of different value propositions, right? It's the beach, the lifestyle, the people, the business climate, the tax circumstances. There's a lot of different things that on an aggregate basis put together are very powerful, but every person has a different lever, right, that is interesting to them, right? So what motivates one person, a CEO of one organization, to have an event down here is very different than what might influence a person at a different company, right? So we use ABM, we can deliver actually over a period of time, you can deliver different messages, right? So almost like in consumer market where you're testing A/B split testing creative, right? So you're running a green ad and a purple ad, and you're sort of seeing there's a girl in this one and a guy in that one, which one has a higher click-through rate. You can actually run different creative through the ABM program, right? So you can test different messages. You can highlight specific attributes of your organization or the event center or whatever it might be. So you can begin to see over time, you can sort of appeal to different aspects of what it is that you have to offer. So maybe this one has the pool and this one has the convention center and this one has the city and all the accoutrements that come with it. So you can do that over time. And then, at the end of the day, though, as you know, it's the experience, right? So we always think about marketing as focusing on, not so much on outbound, right? On just pure advertising. We really focus on blocking and tackling, right? So every business that we work with, before we do any advertising, we go in and sort of say, okay, let's experience the product. What's good about it? What's bad about it? What needs to be fixed? And you'd be surprised, because most people don't always do the blocking and the tackling, because it doesn't make sense to pour on ad spend if your product is not broke, if it's broken, right? If you're, for whatever reason, the customer experience is not good. So we generally say, before we layer on costs, let's make sure the product that we're offering. So we sort of say, start from the inside out, right? So what's the person's experience individually at your particular organization, right? Is it spectacular? And we need to make it spectacular, because that obviously word of mouth advertising is the cheapest and best form of advertising that we can, as an agency, right? Anybody can take advantage of. So we start from the inside out and make sure the blocking and the tackling is worse. So, when people are opening the doors, are they referring to me by name, right? When they walk in, are they greeted? Do you deliver a cocktail? Did you say, did you have a nice day on a plane ride on your chicken? So all this whole experience as you go through this experience from a consumer perspective, and I may not be articulating this particularly well, but really focusing on that first, right? And that generates the good reviews, which in turn then generate a lower cost per acquisition for you, right? So, and that in turn allows you to make more use of the limited marketing budgets that you probably do have. So, I don't know if that answered your question, Kelly, but it's the best I can do, hopefully.
No, you did great, and that definitely helps. I think part of the discussion that I have a lot with my members is understanding the difference between branding and marketing, and a lot of that experiential thing that you talked about is really linked directly to branding.
Yes.
So I think that many people kind of miss that part. They're so focused on the widget and what the widget does,
yep.
Even if it's just a perfectly run event, that they forget that experience part of it is really important in the way your consumer remembers you and their experience with you. So I think that was great advice. Any other questions from our group? No questions? Are you sure? Well, I'd like to move into self-introductions. If you think of a question, go ahead and jump in. But I'd like to hear from you guys a little bit. First of all, if you'd introduce yourself, tell us your name, your company name, your role there, and just a little bit about what life looks like in your neck of the woods. I would appreciate it. Kirby, do you mind to go ahead and facilitate the introductions for us?
Sure. All right. I'm going to start with Ali.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Ali Atmadi at the DoubleTree West Palm Beach. We're also known as the Cookie Hotel, but currently our hotel condition is somewhat healthy. I would say about 80% health. We are seeing a lot of tourists and travelers coming in to Palm Beach County for a visit, as I said earlier, mostly on the weekends, but there is still a struggle with staffing and filling position, and, particularly in housekeeping and line workers. So we are doing our best, obviously, because this is, the current condition, but we can't wait till this turns around and we're back up on our feet again. So that's our current condition. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Michael, and Michael, while you're introducing yourself, can you kind of give us a little, tell us a little bit about what's going to happen at our next meeting? Because I know you are helping a lot with that.
Yes, we're partnering with Michael and his organization for our next meeting, and we're really excited about this. So it's a perfect time for Michael to tell us a little bit about it.
Great. I'm Michael Corbett. I help manage CareerSource Palm Beach County, the regional workforce board. So we try to match companies up with employees. So I'd be happy to talk with you offline if you're starting to staff up. Next month on June 23rd at 10 in the morning, we're going to be doing a quarterly State of the Workforce webinar, and it's going to be focused on hospitality and tourism. We've been fortunate to secure a couple of good speakers, a fellow by the name of Peter Yesowich, who's with MMGY Global. He actually lives in Boca Raton in the winter and up in Chicago in the summertime. It's a global marketing company. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but he's a local fellow, but he's going to talk about what's going on in the tourism industry across the globe. Then we have Rosanna Mayetta from the American Hotel and Lodging Association. She's the president of that organization. She'll talk on a national perspective. And then Glenn Jurgensen from the Tourist Development Council here in Palm Beach County to bring it down to the local level. So if you have 45 minutes to an hour on June 23rd, I would encourage you to register for that. There's no charge to participate. So thank you.
Terrific.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Stefan.
Hey, good morning. My name is Stefan. I'm the chairman of the Taurus Oceanographic Foundation, and as part of our outreach program, we also do dolphin tours to have people experience the dolphins that never lose, unlike the ones with two-legged dolphins farther south of us. And so we still operate dolphin tours, but limited due to COVID. So we only take families, people who travel together, people who live together. We are not mixing people on the boat yet, even though we are all vaccinated, but there's still a huge hill to climb in Florida. I think our vaccination rate is just in the mid-30s. And so we're still being careful. And obviously we have a boat that people hop on, and we have less to clean and less to maintain than hotel operators. But people come out, they do call, and sometimes I'm not quite sure how they find us because we don't do a lot of marketing. We actually don't spend a single dollar on marketing, but except for being members with Discovery Palm Beach and the Attraction Association and that sort of thing. But we get people from all over the world actually to call us. And at the moment, we have most of them we have to decline because they just want to have one or two tickets. And as I said, we're really not ready for that. I think our next stage is to have two groups who know individually each other to come together to still manage the risk. And eventually we go back to selling individual tickets. Obviously, I've yet to see anybody from the chamber to join us. And maybe a good hint for all of you is something that also happens in June and happens in June every year. On June 8th to be specific, and that is, and I look at your faces, you're not sure what it is, but it's World Oceans Day. And it always amazes me that a community that depends on the ocean in so many ways shows so little regard for the celebration, and very few entities actually do anything, even though it would be easy, some food for thought. If you indulge me for 30 more seconds, you could have a special dish in your restaurant. You could have a special event for your guests in the hotel. You can turn June 8th into a reason why people should actually come to Palm Beach County, being at the ocean, and whether your event is on the beach or whether you invite people like us to give a presentation to the people who are in your hotel on June 8th or in that week. Whatever it is, there are lots of different ways to attract the attention of people. And if you're more an earthly person and not a watery person, then you should always remember April 25th, which is World Earth Day. And that is also hardly ever recognized in Palm Beach County, but there's always hope for growth and improvement. So for me as a scientist, you know, I'm always hopeful. Our lifelong dedication to educating people will bear some fruit one day, even though we cannot always be that optimistic.
Well,
I have been doing this for 35 years. I'm not so sure my life was actually really effective.
Well, you can count this day a big success.
But anyway, June 8th, if you do anything in the chamber in that week from June 7th to June 13th, it doesn't necessarily have to be on June 8th. I'm always happy to help people organize something. And anyway, that's my story.
Well, you can count today as a success in your education department, because I actually had no idea that June 8th was Ocean Day. So you have educated me, and I appreciate that. I am a big fan of water and snorkeling and everything in the water. So I will mark my calendar, and I will mark the chamber calendar at June 8th as Ocean Day.
Yeah, it's a little late this year, but maybe for next year.
No,
and I'm not sure. I mean, Lou, very nice presentation. I really appreciate it, even though most of it's out of what we would, or what even you as an expert probably would expect us to do. But very interesting, and I'm sure the bigger boys in the hotels and big restaurants, and they can benefit from your expertise. So I appreciate your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you. You know, it's always the basic stuff, right? At the end of the day, it's the blocking and the tackling. So it's the experience that people have, the limited experience that based on the number of people that are interacting with your brand, and making sure they have a great time. And that is, again, word of mouth is the best driver of business. We can advertise all you want to, but if the product is not good, the experience is not good, it's a waste of money, frankly. So
you're right.
Yeah, just a
compliment.
Yeah, and just to Kelly, I mean, you were mentioning that you meet a lot of people who have difficulties distinguishing marketing from branding. I always used to remember the, additional education I got, and it's, for me, brand is always about who we are, and marketing is all what we do, right? And that, in a nutshell, is really it. And maybe you can just print it out somewhere in the chamber halls, so people are reminded.
I'm going to have it tattooed on all my members. It's a great, that's an excellent way to describe it. I like that a lot, because it's a big concept, but it's really important to get it. Michael, I don't think you actually formally introduced yourself. Who the heck are you and what do you do?
No, I told you, I help run the Regional Workforce Board.
Okay.
You talked about working with the BDB. I spend a lot of my time with them, helping recruit companies here, because the second question is always, where am I going to get my people if I come here? I have two firms this week Gary called me in on, and that it's a big deal. So that's why they come. They want to attract people to their companies.
Yep. And we've had such a successful partnership with Michael with this group. We did a tourism job fair many months ago. That was a big success. Your assistance to this industry locally has been so profound, Michael. Your organization really stepped up here and within the chamber and the tourism task force. So we really appreciate that. And, Ali, your comments about staffing are something that I'm hearing. Kirby and I here at the chamber are hearing this on a regular basis, not just specifically in the tourism industry, but it does seem to be particularly prevalent there. Those frontline workers, when they're still collecting unemployment, it's difficult to lure them back to work yet. So it's a profound problem industry-wide, really, in our area. That's why Michael and his group are so critical to kind of connect those dots and make sure that people understand the talent and the assets that are here. Because, there is, sometimes you're getting information from someone who maybe doesn't have all of the information. So that's one of the things that we've been really pleased about this group, is being able able to bring some experts to get real-time information for our participants as to what's really happening on the streets. So we really appreciate that.
Michael and I have spoken on different occasions, and we are seeing a few here and there, candidates that are coming and applying for jobs. So in the last month, I think, we're seeing a little bit of a positive candidates coming into the hotel. But again, we're so behind that we need to just continue this trend and hopefully fill all the positions that we need.
Well, and I think what's happening, just a supposition on my part, the smart ones are kind of waking up and going, unemployment is going to stop. And I really want to get my foot in the door first. I want to get that, maybe I have a supervisor position just because I'm there a little before everybody else. But so I'm hoping that that's what you're going to start to see, is those people who really are trying to be more thoughtful and proactive, because those are the employees that you want to keep.
Yeah, and I think also businesses need to reevaluate their pay scales for their positions. I think, maybe for many years we've all been under, paying employees in this such a, increasing, economy that we're having here in Palm Beach. So, it's also time for us to reevaluate those positions and really, make sure that we're paying employees the right amount for the job that they're doing.
Yeah, I personally agree with you. I do think that there's a disparity in incomes that needs, and a perception that it is really problematic, and that needs to be fixed, both in terms of reality and in terms of perception, because as we know, and Lou knows, perception becomes reality. So so that's part of it too. We have to make them feel appreciated, like the hospital workers and all of those folks who really got that elevated presence because of the focus and attention on their industry. We really kind of need that in hospitality too. If you want your vacation to be wonderful, then you need wonderful employees creating that for you. It doesn't happen by accident. So I think you're right. I think that perceptions and attitudes have to change, and I think we're going to see that. So I'm happy. There are some self-corrections in the industry that are great, and then there's some really painful corrections too, but some of them are long overdue.
If I can just chime in here for a second, I really appreciate what Ali is saying, because being a scientist, not a business person, well, half a business person, I suppose, but I think if the survival of your business depends on an hourly rate of $7 or something like this, and then your business model might just not be the right one, because it's just not survivable, it's not sustainable. And I think if that leads to some business disappearing, well, for all the free market aficionados, that should be the natural way. And the last thing I want to say as a scientist, please, all of you who are vaccinated, try to convince people to get vaccinated. I know it's a difficult discussion, so I give you an easy way out. Don't get into a long political discussion. As a scientist, there are only three things you need to say. The earth is round, gasoline is flammable, and vaccines do work. And that's really the whole argument you have to present to anyone.
I like that. I may use that. Well, listen, everybody, thank you so much, especially to you, Lou. This information was really timely, I think, as now that we're sort of elevating ourselves a little bit out of the crisis management mode, this is the time for us to be a little more strategic in our planning going forward. So I think your advice and information was very, very timely. And I'm sure we will be sending the contact information from everyone who attended to all of you, including Lou. But I'm sure if you guys think of questions later on and you'd like to reach to Lou, I'm sure he would be more than happy to answer your questions. We did have a couple people who had to hop off early. So I want to thank everyone for coming. And we do have our next event that we'll be working on with Michael. Very excited about that. And what is that date again? I'm looking at my paper here. Wednesday, the 23rd, Wednesday, June 23rd, 10 to 11. So please mark your calendars for that. I think that it'll be a very interesting presentation. I think the speakers sound excellent. And Michael, we really appreciate you putting together this program and allowing us to kind of piggyback on it. So again, thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic day. And we will look forward to seeing you again in person at a chamber event very soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Lou. Thanks again. It was awesome. Bye, everybody.